lovelies, welcome back to my channel. My name is Bryony and you're here on a Tuesday. Tuesdays are when we do deep dives into the environmental, social and ethical issues with the world. And if you've been following me on Instagram, if you haven't, please follow me right here. In the stories is where we determine what topics I'm going to be covering for videos. And today, you actually decided that I would go as Aqua Tofana to a science party that I'm going to. Now you're like, well, Bryony, since you're such an advocate for animals, why would you not go as like a tested on lab rat? Well, my lovely people, surprisingly, going as something that murdered about 600 people is actually more palatable than saying that animal testing is wrong. Oh, society is so screwed up. I've actually taken this opportunity to lead us down an educational path and hopefully an inspiring one. Hopefully a video that will make you realise just how much further we still have to go, even today. So what we're doing is we're creating this makeup look. A lot of things went wrong for me today. If you don't like it, let me know in the comments down below. If you do like it, also let me know in the comments down below. Resources are in the description box down below, along with a number of places that you can donate to as well. Now, of course, today, this is a very serious topic. I tend to actually cover serious topics here, and of course, there are resources for you in the description box down below. If you or someone that you know is actually going through these sort of situations, because I always want to make sure that I'm providing you with resources, because I don't want this to just be like an empty video just saying like all of these terrible things are happening. I am a solution siren. Is it tea or is it Prosecco? You'll never know. Do you know the story of Aqua Tofana? Or Guilia Tofana? Now, most people, at least about 2 million people, know Bailey Sarian. And yes, it was her who reported on this story, so I will just direct you to her video down below. Now, she's inspired me to actually work on this piece, but like I said before, we're diving into bigger issues, all of that other stuff. And I know there's a bit of discourse around the true crime YouTube space at the moment. We're not really going to get too much into that. I will just say that my main inspiration for actually doing videos the way that I do now was actually from Sydney Black. So I'll also link her channel down below too. So when Bailey actually said that there wasn't much on Guilia Tofana, the girl wasn't lying. So all of this is alleged, citation needed, from stories and everything, and there could even be a possibility that she's innocent. So this is based in Italy in the 17th century, where women had no rights, were basically chattel. And if you had a strong opinion about something, then there was a high likelihood that you're actually going to be burned at the stake, because witch burning still happened. Now, on the whole witches situation, I did spooky beauty stories last year, and I'm actually going to be doing the same thing this year, and there is going to be a very good video about witches, because my gosh, my little brain has been holding so much information, it's like a thimble overflowing, because that's about how much information I can hold. Old Guilia Tofana actually used Aqua Tofana to get women out of abusive marriages. Like I said, if you didn't know what the times were like for a woman back in the 17th century in Europe, oh, it was bleak. And there was no way of escape, there was no way of escaping marriage, there was no way of escaping any negative situation at all. And in fact, it wasn't a negative situation, it was probably actually your fault that he was doing this stuff. Gaslighting has been a thing for centuries. Anytime that people are like, oh, I really wish I could live in that time, I'm like, nope. Don't be taking me back. I do no. I'm quite happy now. This is probably the best life that I could be living, because in about 50 years it's going to be terrible anyway with the climate crisis. She actually started by making these cosmetics, and it was originally in a powder form which contained things like arsenic and belladonna, which actually made your pupils bigger because that was considered to be a beautiful thing. Once you'd been using it as a powder, it was like, oh, actually this is easier to slip into someone's drink or someone's soup or meal or whatever when it's a liquid. So then she started making it into a liquid. There was the whole thing that Bailey goes into, but effectively it's a slow running poison that kind of takes like, I don't know, 4 to 7 doses to be able to actually get you like done away with. So this is what she was actually organising for her people, for the people who were stuck in very abusive situations most of the time. Again, all alleged, all of this other stuff, but if we've learned anything from history, it's actually the fact that it's a lot bleaker than what we like to believe it was. Back then, your only form of escape was either you passed away or your partner passed away. This took a little while to actually take effect, and it was actually enough time for them to get their affairs in order. And because like this was in Italy, of course, in the 17th century, everyone was religious, at least generalization. I believe that pretty much everyone was a religious person back then, and so that meant that they could repent for their sins. And so it kind of gave the women that were dooming their husbands effectively to have a chance to repent, still be able to go to the pearly gates and stuff, have a chance at like a decent afterlife. Even though they were the ones that were poisoning them, there's a lot to be said about all of that, but that's why we're talking about it now. So, rumour has it, this affected over 600 men. There's one big number to get your head around, considering the fact that this was in Italy. That, like, there's a lot of theories about the fact that she was poisoning the water and all that stuff. No. It was just Aqua Tofana. And I am not advocating for violence of any kind, for murder, for anything like that. These days, we're a lot more privileged and there tends to be a little bit more wiggle room, so to speak, to be able to get out of like terrible abusive situations. I am not saying that what Guilia Tofana did was right. What I'm saying is, like, I can kind of understand why she felt the need that this was like the way out. Because I know that for me personally, when I see one of my friends or someone that I don't even know going through something, the rage that builds inside me for justice is a lot. So I do kind of understand. She was like, well, I had to get out of my situation, I can actually help other women get out of their situation. I kind of understand her wanting to help the victims here. Not that I'm saying it's right, I'm just saying that it's confusing, there's nuance, there's grey areas, there's all of that stuff, and the fact that back then it was terrible. So now I actually just want to talk about exactly how women were treated in the 17th century. Now this was based in Italy, like I said, so I'm going to be kind of focusing on Europe, because sadly that's where a lot of references come from in history. So I'm just going to quote this from the University of Brighton. Women in the 17th century were second-class citizens. Great. Subject to their fathers from birth and later handed over like chattel to their husbands. Fastidious demands were placed upon them with regards to conduct and virtue with which they were expected to uphold these at all times or be judged accordingly. Philip Stubbs based this idea of quote-unquote the perfect woman on his late wife and wrote of her in the crystal glass of Christian Wives. She was praised for her modesty, courtesy, gentleness, affability, good government. She obeyed the commandment of the apostle who biddeth women be silent and learn of their husbands at home. Here's our next one, Gervase Markham, who listed further qualities of an exemplary English housewife who must be of chaste thought, stout courage, patient, untired, watchful, diligent, witty, pleasant, constant in friendship, full of good neighbourhood, wise in discourse, but not frequent therein, sharp and quick of speech, but not bitter or talkative, secret in her affairs, comfortable in her counsels, and generally skilful in the worthy knowledges which do belong to her vocation. As a woman. Thanks for putting us in our place. Honestly, that's a hella long list for a guy who would be probably holding up a fish in his Tinder profile. I know we can say it was all back then, but we still know that they exist today. So of course, like, what determined if you were a desirable wife? Virginity, beauty, your family status, virginity, your moral status, virginity. So all of those things kind of combined, along with virginity, meant that you would actually be a good wife. Oh, and don't forget, if you were silent as well, that would be fantastic. Now, I do actually want to talk about some pretty inspiring women who stood up against the patriarchy, so to speak, in the 17th century as well, because like I said, we don't want this to all be bad news, we want to have some good news along with it. So we're actually just going to dive straight into that now. I need some more Aqua Tofana. Lady Anne Clifford, from 1590 to 1676. She was disinherited from her family estate after her father's death in 1605 because she was a woman and deemed incapable of keeping up its maintenance. She was actually 15 when her father died, and the inheritance went to her brother, and she waited until she was 56 when she actually finally got the estate and brought it all back up to its wonderful splendour. Only after her husband died though. But she was very staunch in that fight. She fought a lot in order to actually get that estate. Granted, privileged AF, I must put it out there, but finally, she won at the age of 56, which back then, incredibly old. I believe that she actually died in her 80s. I think that she must have been a Scorpio because I don't know many people that can hold a grudge for that long, unless they're like me. I just got concealer in the wrong place. Whilst demonstrations couldn't really be done in the way that they can be done today, like with social media, they had their own kind of social media back then, which was writing. Now look, a lot of it actually reflected on religious stuff back then, but this actually allowed women to get creative with their words. And they're like, actually, I have some thoughts in my little head right here. You look at the list of 17th century feminists, and then the 18th century feminists, They were paving the way, my loves. So let's talk about them. It's time to celebrate. Mary Estelle. Dubbed the first English feminist, she advocated the idea that women were just as rational as men, just as deserving of education. She first published anonymously and then signed by a lover of her sex. In 1694, A Serious Proposal to the Ladies in the Advancement of Their True and Greatest Interests presents a plan for an all-female college where women could pursue life of a mind. Alfred Bren, one of the first English women to earn her living by writing, she broke cultural barriers and served as a literary role model for later generations of female authors. Rising from obscurity, she came to the notice of Charles II, who employed her as a spy in Antwerp. Now, this is a woman that I would love to actually do an entire video on after reading some more about her. If you want that, let me know, please, because keen, very keen. Francois Poulain de la Barre. Yes, we've got a man who sees our side, who is an ally with us. We had it back in the 17th century, we've got a few today, we need more, definitely more. So he was a priest, and then he got into the philosophy of Cartesianism. Now, basically, Cartesians, not courtesans, Cartesians, they view the mind as being wholly separate from the corporeal body, a word which I just learnt yesterday at work. Sensation and the perception of reality are thought to be the source of untruth and illusions, but the only reliable truths to be had in the existence of a metaphysical mind. So it's kind of like the concept that you can lose an arm or a leg, but you're still a person, like you're still you, but you can't lose your mind, literally, because like you can't function then as a person if you don't have a brain. So he wrote many texts of social philosophy which denounced injustice against women and the inequality of the female condition. He was a champion for social equality between women and men. I'm going to butcher this name. Juana Inés de la Cruz, a Mexican nun who was also a writer, philosopher, poet and composer. I feel very unaccomplished. So she was actually known as the 10th Muse, the Phoenix of Mexico, the Phoenix of America, because she rose from the ashes of religious authoritarianism. Her criticism of misogyny and the hypocrisy of men led to her condemnation by the Bishop of Puebla. Puebla. After years of not being taken seriously though, today scholars actually use her work as a subject of vibrant discourse about themes such as colonization, education rights, women's religious authority, and writings as examples of feminist advocacy. Happy divorce, as my husband likes to say. Now look, I am a lucky, privileged, cis-het white woman, and I live in New Zealand, and if I ever did want to get divorced, which I really don't because I'm happily married for 8 years, married for 8 years, my gosh, no, I've been with my husband for 8 years, we've been married for like a year and a half. If we ever did want to get a divorce, it's possible to get a divorce, and the fact that I wouldn't be like chastised, brutally, all this other stuff happened to. Like, we're living in a very privileged position. Granted, it would be very expensive and a lengthy process to do, but if we ever really did want that, it's actually possible. The thing is, today, let's look at a bit of the history of divorce, shall we? So say for example, people are like, well, I mean, she should have just gotten a divorce, because I know that in parts of France that you were actually allowed to get divorced because that was alluded to in Ever After. Oh, my sweet summer child. Oh wow. I like that you think that just because something is legal makes it morally okay, because it absolutely does not, and the same is reversed. So let's just dive into that deep topic now, shall we? Now, whilst you actually can get divorced in most countries around the world today under certain conditions, just because you can technically do that doesn't actually mean that it's socially acceptable to do so. Now, there is an entire Wikipedia page about divorce, and honestly, my Google search is probably going to be worrying a lot of people considering the things I Google for my videos. And of course, I'd be remiss to say that religion doesn't come into a lot of this, because it absolutely does. If you're new here, I'm not religious at all. It's fine if you want to be religious, that's cool, so long as you're not hurting yourself or others with your religion. I honestly do not care. Do what makes you happy, as with most things in life. Sadly, I have to tell you, it's generally only been since the 1900s that we've had more equality with divorce. So like I said, we're talking about the 17th century. That was a whole 200 years later. And I've got some pretty sad facts to tell you as well. So in Ireland, for example, it was only in 1997. Like, this is like in my lifetime that you were only allowed to get divorced. 1997, that number just baffles me. And in Chile, it was in 2004 that you could actually get like equality a bit more. I do certainly have some facts which I really do want to hammer home, because I think that this is really important to the entire context of why we have to fight so much, even still today, for just equality and people being treated like people. Like I said before, just because something is legal doesn't make it actually culturally acceptable. So take for example India. It's actually got one of the lowest divorce rates, actually the lowest divorce rate in the world. However, that doesn't necessarily mean it's got the happiest marriages though, because 1 in 3 women in India actually suffer from intimate partner abuse, and most abuse actually goes unreported. And actually men who grew up in a household where their father hit their mother are twice as likely to do that to their own spouse when they grow up and marry themselves. So it's like patterns of behaviour come into it. There are a lot of different factors that come into it as well, which is why, another reason why I worry so much about this that we're going through right now, because times of emergency, times of strife, times of hardship actually elevate those levels even more. And the other problem is the fact that because of the panoramic, we actually have a situation where we don't get enough people on the ground to get accurate reporting on this stuff. So 1, most of it goes unreported. 2, there's not enough people to actually gather the information on it, and like emergency services for this stuff are cut down more, which is why there are places to donate down below. Please, if you can, do donate. I always bring up LGBTQ rights because 10 of the nations that are actually participating in the Olympics right now, like, you can't actually get legally married if you are like in a gay relationship. So there are so many issues still to this day around this fallacy of equality that we've got around the place, because everyone's like, oh, it's so good today. I'm like, is it though? There's still a lot of work to happen, which is why I wanted to talk about it. Because honestly, if today's situations trap women, then back then it would have been a death sentence. I want to talk about femicide and honour killings, which is still a thing that does tragically happen today. And again, resources for you are in the description box down below about this as well, because I am not informed enough on this topic, but I wanted to raise the awareness of it. And the fact is that there are people plenty reporting on this. So there was actually an honour killing that happened in July this year of Noor Mukadam. She was sadly beheaded for unknown reasons. We do not know the motive as of like filming this right now and as of writing the script. The thing is, from what I've read about it, sadly this is actually a big issue in Pakistan in particular. Along with violence towards women, again, so much of it does go unreported. Low divorce rates do not necessarily mean that there is a happy relationship. Luxembourg is one of the highest rates of divorce, and yet like people are a lot more happy there overall. Personally, I actually think that this shows the level of control over women rather than a happiness scale, so to speak. And the problem is the fact that sadly, with honour killings in particular, women are still the main target of this. And of course the fear of it happening is the way of control over women. So when I say that work still needs to happen around the world, it absolutely 100% does, which is why I'm not going to stop bringing up these problems. And again, resources down below for that, because I know that there are a lot of incredible women that are actually fighting against this work, and sadly Noor was one of them, and she suffered an absolutely terrible fate. Again, the problem is that speaking up against things is still incredibly dangerous if you're a woman, and I would be remiss to not talk about this, because whilst we've come a long way since the 17th century when this stuff was happening, there's still absolutely abhorrent things happening today. And again, like I said, a lot of this actually ties into religion, and I am not well versed enough in that, which is why I'm linking things down below. And if you know anything more about it, please do comment any resources that you have for people, especially if there's ways that we can actually support these people. The thing is, it's not just rurally, it actually also happens in condensed areas as well. And it's not just like in some far off countries that you may be thinking of. Like, it happens in so many places. So that's why I felt it really important to raise this point. I'm just going to put on some glitter now and try and distract myself. Does it look like a skull? Maybe, maybe not. So much violence. The reason I'm gasping, this was the one I was most excited about as well. I will try my best to pick that up. Oh, I can't believe I just did that. crisis not exactly averted. My floor is still covered in glitter. I am now covered in glitter because I couldn't get everything back in the pot. So it's expensive biodegradable glitter. You know, as alluded to before, abuse still mostly goes unreported around the world. Even here in New Zealand, 94% of assault goes unreported. Like I mentioned before, disproportionately this has actually increased since the panoramic as well. And sadly it concentrates in areas of lower socioeconomic class, places where you have a lack of education, single parents, and like I said before, because of the panoramic, things haven't been able to be effectively gathered to actually be able to analyse this stuff. So I want to also talk about medical help. Now I've already talked about Britney's conservatorship, but it's not just for Britney that happens to, it happens to so many people. And the bigger problem here is the fact that conservatorships, which should be an entire video in themselves, I believe that Emily G. Baker has covered it more herself, should have more clauses in order to be able to get people out of them. Because I feel like they're a system that can get easily abused. I do understand the need for them. I understand that when they're actually in the hands of the right people, it can be a very, very good thing to make sure that like the people that aren't able to handle their affairs are looked after. But in Britney's case, like, we can clearly see that, and it's like, how many other people is this happening to? And of course there's the fact of being treated worse by doctors, having your illness not believed, having just experiments done on you because you're a woman and you've got high pain tolerance. And of course being labelled as crazy all the time as well, which is absolutely a huge issue. Of course throughout history it's also been historically people of the BIPOC community that have been targeted against with this as well. And there's still sadly the belief that they can actually have a higher pain tolerance than white people. Like black women to white women, black women can handle more, and I'm like, there is something very, very, very wrong with that sort of line of thinking. And I also want to talk about sexual harassment. We're only about 4 years into the hashtag #MeToo movement, and sadly this is still something that people are dealing with to this day. Like, I've been in the corporate workforce for a decade, and it's really only like, yeah, so the worst of it happened 5 years ago for me, but that's 5 years ago. It's funny how certain things are just etched into your mind of exactly when they happened, right? And the problem is the fact that this sort of behaviour was so normalised. And the thing is, like, the men back then who view things as being just for fun are very reluctant to let go of that as well, at least in my experience and from my own observations. It's like just such a part of life. It's like, oh, but it's just a bit of fun. Like, you turned out alright, right? We're talking to somebody that is embodying themselves as Aqua Tofana. Yeah, alright. If every man who sexually harassed a woman had to pay for their therapy, maybe there would be some justice. Maybe you could just not do it to begin with. I don't know. That would be great. Not constantly have the need to objectify women. I can only dream. I hope that you can kind of understand why I took the inspiration from Guilia Tofana with embodying Aqua Tofana for this look that we've actually created today. I always do try and understand the why someone has actually done something, and I think in this case we absolutely can understand why Guilia did the things that she did. I'm again not saying it's right, because the thing is, ultimately this isn't about like men not being able to hold their arsenic or whatever other like Chicago like reference you want to make to this. It's the fact that entire systems need to change, and as women, as people in general, we need to actually make sure that we're supporting each other. The fact that we believe each other, the fact that we are donating to good causes, the fact that we are also voting in the right ways as well, because it's not just women that this impacts, it's the LGBTQIA+ community as well. One of the biggest takeaways I want you to take from this is the fact that asking for help shouldn't bring shame on yourself or your family. It should only bring shame on the person who has done the wrongdoing, or people, as it may be in some cases. The thing is as well that Me Too only started 4 years ago, and we've still got an incredibly long way to go, and I think it's really, really important the fact that we are celebrating the way that we've actually been able to make progress, but also recognising, actually, there's some things that probably need to change still, in a positive way for everyone. Now the thing is, this is not an attack on men, it's an attack on the system itself, and the fact that I just want people to be able to feel safe going about their everyday lives and not feeling like they're gonna be a number of things I can't say for demonetization reasons. These systems that hold people down were put in place by the patriarchy, and they can absolutely be taken down with the help of everyone, including male allies. So if you have husbands, partners, relations, friends, anything with the men in your life, I do still encourage you to have conversations with this around these sorts of topics. I know that I am always doing this because I'm the obnoxious person in my group around any group that I'm in, and whilst it may be confronting, it's still planting those seeds, and I think that that's really important to actually have these conversations and confront why people think that certain actions are okay, why people think that certain systems are okay when they're actually built to harm others. So yeah, I hope that you lovelies have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm gonna probably deposit glitter literally everywhere that I go now. Luckily we're hoovering tomorrow. I'm just looking at my floor. At least this stuff's biodegradable. Anyway, I'll see you on Tuesday, maybe on Sunday for a review. I know I keep on saying that. I do still have things that I've got waiting to review. It's just a matter of filming. I work full time. Life is hard. It's a lot. Anyway, thank you lovelies so much. I'll see you next time. Bye! I may be a bit too tipsy from all of the Prosecco's I've had in my little teacup. Teacup. So, this dress, already secondhand, already have these amazing pockets here. However, you, my lovelies, are the ones that, you know, told me to readjust it to make sure that it could actually work for this look. And I think it works really well.